I know that was a long gospel, but it was one of the more famous ones, the parable of the sower. Some seed falls on rocky soil, other seed falls on good soil. I got two things for you today. The first thing is that this is a fine gospel to remind ourselves that Jesus was a real guy that actually said this stuff. And here's what I mean by that. Some of you have probably read it. Father James Martin wrote a book several years ago called Jesus, a Pilgrimage. Basically, it's a what I did on my summer vacation book. He went on pilgrimage to the Holy Land and did his best to retrace the life of Jesus as best as he could. This is pretty usual. This is just what priests do. I have done the exact same thing, although in seminary. So one thing that Father James did was he was constantly asking people, where is the place that Jesus did this, or where is the place where Jesus said this? Because the Holy Land is actually organized like that with respect to the Christian holy sites. You can go to the place we believe that Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount. You can look over Jerusalem the way Jesus did. And if you want, you can go to the church of the Annunciation of Gabriel to Mary, where Gabriel spoke to Mary at the well. So all that stuff is there. Well, apparently, Father Martin is a big fan of today's gospel reading. So we asked these friars and nuns maintaining these sites in the Holy Land, hey, where did Jesus give the parable of the sower? And these very strong Christians living in the Holy Land looked at him like he was crazy, or at least like he was a naive tourist. And they basically told him, sorry, Father, that place doesn't exist. You know, they either believed that the location had been lost to time, or that Jesus never actually said that stuff, and Matthew was just putting words in Jesus' mouth for the sake of his gospel. And so Father James heard that from a couple of people, and he was bummed, but not too much, because a lot of locations from the New Testament have been lost to time. It's been 2,000 years, it happens. But the amazing thing is, while exploring an area near the Sea of Galilee, Father Martin kind of stumbled upon this unique little area on the Sea of Galilee. There was access to the water and all of that, and just the way the surrounding hills were situated, it created a quasi-enclosed space where a lot of people could easily gather and, sit down comfortably while focusing in the same direction toward the lake. I keep calling it a lake. It's the Sea of Galilee. We live in the Midwest. If you went there, it's a lake. Just a fact. Anyway, on the Sea of Galilee, and Father Martin looked at the sea and he realized that it would be very easy for someone to take a small boat several yards off of shore in order to speak to the people, because calm water amplifies sound. That is true. We've known that for a long time. So these bays all over the world throughout history, these bays have acted like natural amphitheaters when someone wants to talk to a large group of people all at once, because that's a quality of sound. You can do that obviously without a microphone and other technology which didn't exist for Jesus. So Father James, is looking at all of that and he's saying, man, these are exactly the conditions the gospel said that Jesus gave the parable of the sower. He went out to a boat and spoke to the people on shore. Isn't that remarkable? And then he looked around. He just glanced around, and with a cursory examination of the area, he found every type of terrain in the parable. There was a path, there was rocky soil, there was weedy, thorny soil, and there was good soil. And all of it was plain to see if anybody was there. It wasn't hidden or anything like that. If you just look around the area, you would see everything that Jesus mentioned. And when Father James put all that together, he's like, conditions are just too perfect for any other conclusion. Jesus Christ was here for the parable of the sower. And I love that story. I love that story because people are constantly whining and complaining about why something isn't true or why something won't work. It's easy to complain. It's easy to nitpick, and it's easy to look for problems when none may exist in the first place. One thing I learned, before my time, apparently there was a time in history where people were saying, Pontius Pilate, he didn't exist. That's a fictitious character they added in there. And then we discovered archaeological evidence that the governor of Israel about that time was a guy named Pontius Pilate. That stuff never ends. You can read all that stuff, similar complaints about the Exodus, King David, the lives of the saints. It never ends. Complainy people will always exist, and often with loud voices. But there's truth. There is truth behind this stuff if only you're willing to see it for what it really is. That's not always easy, but it's always worthwhile. And otherwise, the second thing I have for you, we should talk about the parable itself a little bit. There was rocky soil, there was good soil. Now, the message is the message. It doesn't really change. A seed is a seed, no matter what ground it falls on. So the quality of soil that Jesus is talking about in the parable, well, that's not really about Jesus' message. That's about the openness of our hearts. When we receive Christ's truth, that message like a seed, as the soil receives a seed, will our souls prove fruitful, or will they be dry and lifeless? You will know by the fruits of your life, 30, 60, 100-fold. So when Christ really takes root in our lives, we produce way more goodness than we consume. And just like how biological life bears fruit when it takes root in good soil, we bear fruit in our lives when we take root in a foundation of goodness. And I can sum up that goodness with 3 words by way of St. Paul: faith, hope, and love. If you put them together, that is the good soil for Christ's life-giving message. So let good soil be in your hearts.